Undertale is a game that needs no introduction. Its colorful cast of characters and one-of-a-kind story have left a lasting impact on the indie gaming scene. But this isn't a video about Undertale. I'm here today to talk about Undertale Yellow, and how it uses subtle messaging to deliver its ideas and messages to the player. Undertale Yellow is a fan-made prequel to Undertale that at the time of this video's release has been out for almost a year. In Undertale Yellow, you play as Clover, the sixth human to fall into the underground. On your journey through the underground, you'll travel through familiar locations such as the ruins and Snowden. While these areas may look similar to their counterparts from the original game, Undertale Yellow has you explore different parts of these areas, which keeps the experience fresh. After this stretch of the game, you get to explore two entirely new parts of the underground: the Dunes, a sprawling desert complete with a mining cave, oasis settlement, and cowboy town, and the Steamworks, an abandoned factory full of mysteries. The game follows the same gameplay structure as Undertale, giving you the option to kill or spare every enemy, complete with three unique story routes: Neutral, Genocide, and Pacifist. Undertale Yellow borrows a lot from its predecessor, but also does enough to stand alone as its own unique experience. While a few familiar characters like Toriel and Flowey make appearances, the game features a new cast of remarkable and lovable characters, and although the combat system is also copied from Undertale, the game makes enough adjustments to the formula to keep things fresh. Undertale Yellow's greatest strength is its narrative. The story it tells serves as both a supplement to the classic Undertale story, as well as its own standalone adventure. This video is not about Undertale Yellow's narrative, but rather how Undertale Yellow uses clever game design to tell multiple, distinct stories at the same time. So what exactly do I mean when I say Undertale Yellow has multiple stories? The first story that likely comes to mind is the game's narrative. Without getting into specifics or giving any spoilers, Undertale Yellow's narrative revolves around Clover, the sixth human to fall into the underground. Throughout Clover's travels in the underground, the player learns more about the events that took place before Undertale's story. While a game's narrative might be the prime example we point to when we think of a game's story, if we stretch our definition of the word story, we find that games can be used as storytelling devices in more ways than one. While any story-centered game may deliver a central story through narrative, games can also deliver stories in more subtle ways. In the case of Undertale Yellow, an additional story stands out to me. This story is one of perseverance and dedication that takes place contextually, both inside the game and within the real world, blurring the line between the two. While Undertale Yellow didn't necessarily have a troubled development, it wasn't smooth either. The game was in development for 7 years, leading to anxiousness within the community regarding whether the game would ever see a full release. The perseverance of the developers is reflected in the writing of the game. Littered throughout the game are pieces of dialogue that offer heartfelt life advice or comment on situations that the player may be dealing with in the real world. One perfect example of Undertale Yellow's subtle messaging is the fight against El Bailador, a cheerful dancer that Clover encounters halfway through the game. From a gameplay perspective, this fight stands out thanks to its Guitar Hero-inspired mechanics. As you fight against El Bailador, he tells Clover his motive for fighting: to spread his love of dance. He tells Clover about the grim state that the underground is in, how dance is his escape from his struggles, and how he hopes to spark passion in every monster he meets. El Bailador is a character with little relevance in the narrative of Undertale Yellow. He doesn't interact with any of the other major characters, or contribute to the plot in any meaningful way. His comments to Clover feel less like a conversation between the two in-game characters, and more like a conversation between the developer and the player. As someone who's faced struggles during my childhood, and used games as an escape mechanism, I found myself relating to El Bailador's message of trying to find happiness during times of struggle. At the time I was replaying Undertale Yellow and recording the footage for this video, I was going through a particularly rough moment in my life, and found myself resonating with the message more than ever. While this particular message about always striving to find joy was one I resonated closely with, Undertale Yellow is full of subtle messages similar to El Bailador's. From a shopkeeper who is struggling to keep it together while on the job, to even just some flavor text about a sapling on the ground. The game is full of anecdotes for the player about passion, dedication, social anxiety, failure, and many other topics. The amount of subtle messaging in the game means that each player is able to connect with the game in a different way. In the same way that I resonated with El Bailador's message, someone else who plays the game will have had different life experiences from my own, and might resonate with the game differently from the way I have. This is the strength of using subtle messaging as a narrative device within games. Rather than explicitly delivering a story to the player, this technique allows each player to interpret their own story, one that is unique and relevant to their own personality and life experiences. In order for subtle messaging to successfully serve its intention, the game needs to make an assumption about its players. In his article, The Ethics of Computer Games, game scholar Miguel Sicart teaches us about the importance of players as ethical agents. A computer game is then a moral object that is actualized by a moral agent. When games like Undertale Yellow choose to include specific and targeted narrative devices, these games make the assumption that there is a level of moral understanding and common ground between the players and the game. A young child with limited vocabulary and life experience won't be able to fully grasp certain rhetorical devices in the same way that an animal cannot understand them. To quote the game Overanalyser from his video about procedural rhetoric, a designer either intentionally encodes or creates a system that generates meaning, and it's up to the player to complete this meaning by interfacing with the system. One interesting application of subtle messaging is how this technique is able to influence the subconscious of the player. As opposed to more direct storytelling methods, subtle messaging may influence the player without them even realizing it. In the same way that someone's worldview can be greatly influenced by the type of news they consume, a player's perspective can be influenced by the type of games that they play. In Undertale Yellow's case, the use of subtle messaging is harmless, but consider the way that other games might leverage this device in order to exploit players. One article I found, that I've linked in the description, discusses the ways in which games use subtlety to advertise to players. Due to the subtle nature and the persuasive impact achieved through a classic storytelling approach, in-game advertisements have gained immense popularity among marketers. While subtle messaging is primarily a narrative tool, it can have applications outside of narrative as well, even if these applications might be morally questionable. If there's one thing we can take away from Undertale Yellow's narrative design, it's that sometimes the most meaningful part of the game can be hidden inside the smallest of details. The next time you play a game, take the time to appreciate all the little details the developers have intentionally put into the game, and you just may discover an entirely unique and personalized way to enjoy the game. Thanks for watching.